Let's start, Andrew. Before we get to the health front, the latest on those numbers, I want to talk again about this $130 billion wage keeper program. What a huge response there's been from the business community in terms of the need for this. It shows how much this is needed. And also the praise, I think, has been well placed. Jennifer Westacott, I spoke to her earlier. That interview is coming up in about half an hour. She's the head of the Business Council, and she said yesterday was basically a nation-saving day, Andrew.
She did, and I think those are fair words, Kieran. I mean, this $130 billion wage subsidy package, giving employers the funds to pay their staff $750 a week while they're in hibernation, really has been well received. It's been well received, as you said, by the Business Council, by unions. Even the opposition supports it. You would expect that because it is the most significant economic measure so far, and one so important to tying jobs to businesses, keeping businesses and jobs afloat. Now, it's not the last of the COVID-19 crisis economic measures to be announced by the government in the next week. As I understand it, the states are working on respective packages to financially help commercial landlords who have been forced to waive the bills of tenants in shopping centres and the like, as they've been forced into hibernation, or hotels, etc. Land tax relief very much on the table, and certainly being considered by the New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet there. The pressure's on to help the landlords because they're doing something for the renters. We can also expect further business tax breaks from the federal government, and that announcement could happen later this week or early next week. In terms of more assistance for residential tenants, there is a view that the wage subsidy issue has helped those tenants to the extent they will not need as much assistance as has been previously thought, but I guess rent assistance is still on the table. And then there are the airlines, Kieran, as you spoke about. So Virgin Australia, we've been reporting all morning, are seeking a $1.4 billion loan from government. As I understand it, Kieran, they are not going to receive that money. Not at the moment anyway. There's not the enthusiasm to do something further for the airlines at the moment from the Prime Minister Scott Morrison, I'm told. The airlines can already use the wage subsidy that other businesses can, and some of the money recently announced for regional airlines. We've had Qantas, by the way, say that if Virgin get 1.4, we need 4.2 billion. Nothing's ever off the table in the current environment, but the government has already given the airlines several hundred million. They've waived passenger charges as well as given money to regional airlines the other day. And there's no hunger to do more at the moment as part of this package, despite this plea from Virgin. I have heard a suggestion that Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack and the Nationals are keener on doing something more for Virgin, but the Prime Minister is not that keen, but the Deputy PM's hosed that down to me today.
But as you pointed out, nothing is off the table at the moment, and if we needed a reminder of that, we saw it yesterday with that huge package. Let's look at something else that you've been watching. This is like a Tampa-style standoff we're seeing with some cruise ships off the New South Wales coast.
Isn't it ever? New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller's basically using the old John Howard saying, we will decide who comes to this country in the circumstances which they come, isn't he? I mean, he's saying these cruise ships are lingering off the coast. He's refusing to let them in. Now, I've spoken to the Police Commissioner and he points out that there are thousands on board these ships, passengers and crew, and if they were let off, they have the potential to flood the New South Wales health system if there is a COVID-19 outbreak, and that they could essentially wipe out the work the public has been doing in staying indoors in the hope of flattening the curve and freeing up ICU beds. So consider this for a second. We've been taking Australian citizens, we've been taking people who are critically ill or whatever, but if these cruise ships are from another port, the argument here is, why should Australia and New South Wales take them in and risk our own citizens once we start seeing all these COVID-19 cases? So perhaps we could have another look at what you pulled up earlier there and the New South Wales and Victoria figures on the curve, Kieran, because this is so important to everything we talk about, isn't it? Let's look at this curve of increases in cases every day if we can. this is the increase every day. This isn't the number of cases. So you can see, you know, really worrying. And I think these would have been about the times you saw governments crack down on social distancing measures. 430 and 460, the spikes, then a growth of 286 yesterday. Let's have a look at New South Wales. It's hardly surprising, I guess, when people are inside, and mobile phone data shows they're 80% more inside, at least over the weekend, to see that situation. They want it to go negative, Kieran. That's the thing. They don't want any growth before they could think about pulling away any of these shutdowns. So we're a long way off. I mean, Greg Hunt said then early promising signs. That's all he said. Let's have a look at Victoria. This is what worries both of us this morning. Now, there's often reasons for this. Maybe there are more tests, etc. You don't know why, but that doesn't encourage you, does it? That sort of 96. No. Now, we just heard Greg Hunt announce a deal with the states and private hospitals to free up these ICU beds, and I spoke about this yesterday. I said there was a kerfuffle over it because there was a suggestion the federal government had promised to underwrite it. Now we find out it's a 50-50 federal-state deal. But it's been put to me, as much as yesterday was the most important economic announcement by the federal government on this crisis, Kieran, this is the most important health announcement. It makes sense because if you're climbing from, say, 2,000 to 3,000 ICU beds across the country to 7.5, that is really going to help us as this crisis unfolds.
Indeed it is. And just to recap a little of what you said earlier about Mick Fuller, I want to play for our viewers some comments that the New South Wales Police Commissioner said a bit earlier in the day. Have a look.
The reality is that there are thousands of people potentially in cruise ships off our coast that aren't members of our state, and if we take them in, then that could well flood our system unnecessarily. All the hard work we've done could be over. These cruise ships have ports that aren't in Australia, they aren't in New South Wales. Federal government has issued warning notices to return to their port of origin, and I think they should listen to those warnings. Now, of course, we will continue to show humanitarian care to those individuals who need it. We'll continue to allow them to have fuel and food, but it is time to go to your port of origin.
Commissioner Fuller, with that strong language, and had a strong message when you spoke to him as well on that front, but it extends as well to the population who lives in New South Wales, and that is basically defending these draconian measures, and not just the fact that we're not meant to socialise in groups of more than 2, but if you do, you could face jail time.
Well, that's right, Kieran. I mean, you can't even go out unless you've got reasonable excuse. Or you could be in jail for 6 months or cop an $11,000 fine. I mean, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll show you what reasonable excuses are because I think it's an important information service I can do there for our viewers. But we know the National Cabinet wanted tougher rules on restricting to groups of 2 gatherings outside the household. But New South Wales has gone further with these very tough measures. Legislation or regulation basically drawn up in 24 hours. It's the Public Health COVID-19 Restrictions on Gatherings and Movement Order 2020. Let's have a look at what qualifies as a reasonable excuse, if I can take you through this. Getting food, travelling to work, if you have to, otherwise you should work from home, travelling to access childcare, education, exercising, obtaining medical care, attending a wedding or funeral, although there's only 5 or 10 people allowed, depending which function, moving to a new house, providing care or assistance to a vulnerable person, donating blood, accessing social services. For children, if you don't live in the same household as parents or siblings, you can visit them, and there's facility for a minister of religion to visit. There's facility to avoid injury or illness. There's nothing in there about going to see family members. I mean, it's really strict stuff. So, look, there's a bit of discomfort around the place in New South Wales government about this. It's been put to me the big driver of these rules has been David Elliott, the police minister, even though it's signed by the health minister, Brad Hazzard. As one of his colleagues said to me, he is gung-ho, and that's all fine, providing we're able to put this in the box afterwards. One New South Wales minister, however, complained to me, Kieran, we're letting people out of jail because of COVID-19 to stop the spread, because they're near the end of their term, and we're about to lock people up because they are on the street. but says anyone who opposes this will be painted as someone who doesn't care about people dying, so they don't feel like they can oppose it. This is a potential massive infringement of civil liberties. The test will be how it plays out, because we know the motivation. The motivation's a deterrent, particularly to young people who just weren't listening before to what governments were telling them to do. And an $11,000 fine or 6 months jail, that's a pretty good motivation. But it's also been pointed out to me, New South Wales has only issued 13 infringements so far, and it's more about sending a signal. Well, we'll keep a close eye on this one, Kieran. I think it's important too. I just wanted to raise one final thing. That's the bank announcement yesterday on deferring business loans. Now, a lot of people have contacted me not too happy that announcement by Anna Bligh from the Australian Bankers Association defers the loan for business, but not the interest. So you don't have to pay your loan for a while, but the interest continues to accrue under that system. Perhaps the banks could consider an interest holiday as well, Kieran.